So, why do I suggest that fully 100% of habitable planets would have some kind of life develop on them? Well, this is certainly open to debate, and I suppose that finding life on Mars or any kind of any kind would help us support this argument. But it is based on the work of Dr. Grace Wolfe Chase at the Adler Planetarium at the University of Chicago. She discusses protostar formation and finds that strings of carbon readily bond to helium-4 nuclei in the nuclear fusion process known as triple alpha. This is nucleosynthesis, and it's the process that processes carbon-12, which is a basic building block of carbon-based life as we know it. So not only would life be very, very probable, but in fact carbon is the best candidate for it, since it is involved in the formation of stars. But there is more reason to believe that life will be found on Mars, which currently does not seem to have an atmosphere to support liquid water. If life is discovered, which it probably will be soon, then we have good reason to believe that life will emerge wherever it gets the chance. The reason has to do with the presence of extremophiles on Earth that live in the most inhospitable conditions. This doesn't mean that life did emerge elsewhere, but it does give us good reason to believe that life will adapt and evolve into complex biological systems everywhere it gets a chance. Finding any kind of life would just give us cause to believe it is capable of developing into more complex life forms. Not because it happens only here on Earth, but that's just what life does. Okay, number 4 in my UFO-ET hypothesis. The argument against is that consciousness is rare and exceedingly unlikely here. You know, if the dinosaurs hadn't been wiped out, then human beings wouldn't have had a chance, so it probably won't develop into something more complex with any more degree of certainty than life itself will anywhere else. I argue that just as life emerges, conscious experience in complex systems does too. As the neuroscientist Christoph Koch suggests, there is no need for an evolutionary explanation for conscious experience, just as it makes no sense to talk about an evolutionary reason for why particles have positive or negative charge. Consciousness just arises out of complex biological systems. Some life forms like dinosaurs and bees have less of it. Some like us and dolphins and pigs have more. It's just the way it is. But even so, I'm giving intelligent life a 1 in 10 chance of developing, and besides, 1 in 10, this is Carl Sagan's estimate anyway. Okay, while I'm at it, a little note on the Fermi Paradox. This is the puzzler that asks if there are so many intelligent civilizations out there capable of communicating with us, why haven't they? Well, the most reasonable answer to this is simply, I don't know. Another answer could be, well, why would they want to? A third answer that would require much more evidence, but should not be ruled out, is perhaps they have, and we haven't had the means to understand it yet. This is not an argument from ignorance, nor is it proof of anything, except that perhaps the Fermi Paradox is not the right question to ask. As the skeptics like to argue, we shouldn't confuse the unexplained with the unexplainable. The Fermi Paradox, in my opinion, is an assumption gone wild. Alrighty then, number 5. You may recall I mentioned a scientific explanation of apparent faster-than-light travel, if not instantaneous communication. This is quantum entanglement, or what Einstein lamented with his phrase, spooky action at a distance, because it shouldn't work this way, but it does. I think it's fair to say that nobody really knows how quantum mechanics works, except apparently those who have never actually studied it in depth. Those folks say they understand it. Pairs of entangled photons do communicate with each other, and I put communicate in quotations regardless of space, time, and distance between them. This puts no speed of light limitation on some form of communication across vast distances. And in fact, I should mention our own Professor Dave Paris's study on microspace warp shows great promise for a propulsion method in macrospace warp. More about this later. But this is why I put the length of time to reach us factor in the Drake equation 100% or irrelevant, because there's no reason to suspect a species even 50 years more advanced than us could not have figured out how to traverse long distances. Item number 6 addresses the skeptics who point out the utterly outlandish claims of UFO-ET contactees that they have had so-called psi experiences in their encounters, such as telepathy with beings who seem to have telekinetic and clairvoyant powers, and that they can manipulate time. Well, our study group has attempted to replicate Daryl Bem's study of precognition. This is the Cornell psychologist. We did that without success, and we are studying electronic voice phenomena, and we have an ongoing study trying to establish the veracity of out-of-body experiences. Regardless, parapsychologist Dean Radin found in his meta-analysis studies that psi abilities are subtle, but they are established as a real phenomenon. They cannot be produced on command in a magic theater, but they are there with enormous odds against chance that they are not. So the idea that the claims made by UFO-ET contactees are all ridiculous is yet another example of the unscientific approach made by skeptics. I want to be very careful with slide number 7 here to make myself clear. I am saying that the psi phenomena of telepathy, clairvoyance, telekinesis, and precognition are the same attributes contactees ascribe to these beings whose origin and purpose is unknown. I am not saying this is hard evidence of extraterrestrials or anything of the sort. I am trying to explain the logical argument that applies here called modus ponens. If all A are B and C is an A, then C is a B. So just like saying if all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, then Socrates is mortal, in this case I'm saying that if all telepathy, A, are psi phenomena, B, and a contactee report C involves telepathy, then that contactee report C involves psi, B. This should cause us to explore the connection between contactees and psi abilities as a scientific question. This is a valid form of reasoning. The invalid method of reasoning here is one that causes people to make unwarranted assumptions about the claims contactees make. If all telepathy is psi, and this contact involves psi, that means the contactee has telepathic ability? In other words, if a contactee claims to have psi ability, then they should or must have telepathy? No, that is not what I'm saying. But that invalid form of reasoning leads some to dismiss claims of, say, fortune tellers who know that they were going to get sued, so why didn't they figure that out? The simplest thing we can say is that telepathy is a psi ability. And when a contact report involves telepathy, then that contact seems to have some connection to psi, but not all forms of psi. Therefore, we should study psi abilities of contactees if they are willing to participate, and see where that takes us. We should not assume contactees must have other psi abilities.